I'm Non-Zero Sum James, your companion on this exploration of win-win games. Looking to the future. 8 bottles. A simple recycling idea, part 3. Let's take a look through our crystal ball at Glass Bottle Utopia, where all companies have seen the wisdom of using a standardized set of 8 different sized jars and bottles. The system works in a perfect cycle with no waste, no intensive processing, automated sorting, and free allocation of our 8 glazed saviors. The process is so efficient, it's virtually costless, which is a good job because plastics, which fund this program through the plastic tax, have all but been eliminated. We have the return centre going through to businesses, which goes through to consumers, which goes back to the return centre, and then back out to businesses. A perfect cycle. Paradise. Until we realise you can't squeeze glass. Nope. Deal breaker there. Who wants to return to the days of thumping their tomato sauce out of the bottle, only to wind up drenching their chips when half a litre ejects at once? Now this might seem like a superficial issue, but it points to a larger one. The market demands the most functional and often the most desirable packages in order to stand out. There's a reason why our utopia carries a lurking dystopic sense. It fails to appreciate the deep human need for novelty and invention. But this just serves to illustrate that there is no one panacea, and yet we still have the problem that plastic recycling is not sustainable. Luckily, there are experts who have been fighting this battle for decades, who have developed successful present solutions and have big plans for the future. So we're going to look at some of the plans implemented by councils, governments, and private companies that are already at work today. Food waste. First, in my neighbourhood of Auckland, New Zealand, successful pilots are being expanded for food scraps bins. These collections may seem inconsequential, but they are in fact very effective. Firstly, these programs stop organic waste from going into landfill, which is important because when organic waste goes into landfill, it not only takes up unnecessary space, but more importantly, it produces methane and can combine with inorganic material, creating toxic compounds that enter the groundwater. Secondly, this food waste also gets composted, making the most of the valuable nutrients. So that's a win-win. Single-use plastics. In New Zealand, the end of plastic bags in supermarkets seems to have finally succeeded. And as with so many policies aimed at a healthier society, such as the smoking in bars legislation and the anti-smacking legislation, despite an initial uproar from regressive opponents, it has been painlessly accepted across the country. This change is reflected in numerous countries across the world, including 30 countries in Africa, as well as China, Europe, UK, Bangladesh, Colombia, even the small 2-island nation of St. Kitts and Nevis, who are aiming for a 30% plastic reduction in 5 years to preserve their tourism industry. The main player in all this, Greenpeace, hopes to consolidate this piecemeal progress with their treaty on plastic, reducing the amount of single-use plastics in circulation around the world. But not only are there reasons to be hopeful politically, there are also independent actors helping to make changes. Happy Cow Milk. Glen Harrod's Happy Cow Milk supplies milk from cows that are allowed to stay with their calves and is supplied in reusable glass bottles. While his is a heartwarming story of a more humane approach to farming, it's also a testing ground for the use of reusable glass containers, which shows it can be done, even with something as hygienically problematic as milk. So, why not fund more of this? Or do this on a national scale? Heck, an international scale? Well, efforts are being made. The Container Return Scheme, CRS. The Container Return Scheme was proposed by the New Zealand government in 2022 to charge a small fee, 20 cents, for each container used, which could be refunded at a return centre. The Zero Waste Network claims no other single waste stream could be managed so easily by such a proven method as a mandatory CRS, where recycling rates overseas of 85 to 95% are common. Unfortunately, in March 2023, under pre-election pressure to focus on more centrist policies, then Prime Minister Chris Hipkins deferred the container return scheme in New Zealand. Not incidentally, Hipkins wasn't re-elected. Yet another data point that appeasement centrism isn't as politically pragmatic as it's supposed to be. So perhaps it's a little unrealistic to think we could push our even more ambitious plan, which, after all, not only requires infrastructure for plastic taxation and building return centres, but also requires the design of the standardised bottles and jars in the first place. But I'll make one final pitch for it. Returning to 8 bottles. There's a possibility that the reason we can't get support for a container return scheme might be because we've seen it before. And even though it has at times been successful, people find it hard to believe something that's been around for such a long time and hasn't solved the problem can suddenly solve the problem. But what about a scheme based on a new product? People love new products. A standardised set of bottles and jars is new, and depending on what gets you excited, potentially exciting. It also has 4 unique benefits. 1, it's not paid for by those businesses adopting it, but by a plastic tax, a double incentive to make the shift. 2, it makes participating businesses look good, with identifiable containers prompting consumers to associate the business with sustainability. 3, it doesn't involve any bans or mandatory actions that might have negative impacts on particular businesses that might, for valid reasons, need perhaps squeezy plastic bottles. And 4, most importantly, because of the standardization, the labor-intensive process of sorting thousands of different products and treating each one appropriately is eliminated. So, we have seen that small companies like Happy Cow Milk and small countries like St Kitts and Nevis can lead the way. My own country, New Zealand, has a history of firsts. We were the first to give women the vote, the first to climb Everest, and we have been a fertile ground for testing various technological innovations such as EFTPOS, electrified bus networks, telehealth solutions, and e-prescriptions. New Zealand's knack for innovation and willingness to be trailblazers makes us ripe for a sustainability revolution. Not to mention, it comes along with and could support our clean green image. Despite setbacks like the CRS scheme getting deferred, let's be the prototype, then export it to the world. Who's with us? Or else we could just put the CRS back on the table. There's always that.